What's going on? Welcome to Shred Gaming and the first episode of the Shredcast, where I bring in Temp, who is an FGC veteran, and we discuss Project L, the FGC, and what it's going to take for Project L to succeed in the FGC, as well as a standalone game. And before we get to the video, I just wanted to say thank you so much to everyone who has subscribed. Since the last video, I've gone up to 73 subscribers, which means I've gotten 19 more subscribers. And I would like to see that number continue to grow. I'm shooting for 100 by the end of the week. And so if you can, please like, subscribe, comment down below, help this channel grow. Now let's get after it. All right. Hey, Temp, what's going on, man?
Hey, what's going on, dude?
Hey, how's your Thanksgiving?
Thanksgiving was good. Strange weather, but yeah, good seeing everyone, even if only for a short time.
Strange weather in Texas?
Yeah, it's been very wet lately. Cold and wet, which I don't hate. Our winters tend to be kind of mild in Texas, so this was a nice change of pace. I just don't like driving in it.
It's similar here, except without the wet. It's just cold. It's still sunny, just cold.
Nice. I like that too. I'm a big fan of just like general anything that's not hot, horrible Texas weather.
Yeah, I'm kind of partial to that. Like it feels. I live, near Sacramento, and it's just it's boring. Like the weather, it's like I'm like, okay, if it's gonna be cold, at least snow or something. And no, it's just cold. It's just cold and sunny.
Yeah.
But
yeah, if you took a picture of it, it would look the same as any other season.
Pretty much. Yeah. So, all right. The topic we were talking about the other day was, first off, I wanted to say okay, I brought you on because where I am a fighting game player, I will play one game for months and months and months on end. Like I will play Street Fighter 5 for like 4 straight months, and then Mortal Kombat X for 4 straight months, and that's how I play. Versus you are more so like, every time I ask, we're like, hey, what are you playing? Oh, I'm playing Soul Calibur 6. Like then the very next day I'm playing Grand Blue Fantasy, and the next day you're playing, you kind of bounce around, and you're way much more of a variety fighting game connoisseur versus I'm very linear. So I wanted to bring up your expertise on the whole on Project L and how you think it will fare in the fighting game community and what it takes to succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that's almost entirely correct. I think a lot of that came from necessity. I generally go where the competition is, which is why there's probably been more Street Fighter 5 than any other fighting game on our Discord. But thankfully,
Right.
Natsa is really into Grand Blue. Gap Standard is very into Grand Blue. A lot of the more like old school guys who go back to the early Nethercast days, they took mostly to Soul Calibur. They were pretty big fans of Soul Calibur 6. So there's a lot of games I love that I just don't play just because there's no one to run sets with.
Right. I remember Max dude actually saying that about dnfduel. He was like, this is like one of the funnest fighting games I've ever played, but it's like there's no one online anymore.
Yeah.
So, which is sad about that. I wanted to bring up that real fast with dnfduel because that was one of the funnest fighting games I played, and I was really disappointed to see that fall off so quickly.
Yeah, DNF is going to come up quite a few times, honestly, during this conversation, because I think it is very relevant to League. I think the DNF situation is not the same as League for big reasons, but I think the League fighting game is susceptible to some of the same problems. One's very specific one, I think. But.
Oh, right on. So that's actually a great segue. So let's talk about that a bit, because DNF came in and it fell off like, gosh, what was it, like a month? Like it was relevant?
Something like that.
Yeah, it was disappointing. And like a lot of the characters in it were insanely fun. Like I've never seen a character like Grappler ever. And Lancer was cool because you don't ever get to see like polearm characters.
Yeah, there's a lot of really cool things in that game. I always say it reminds me of a 2D Soul Calibur, um,
Okay.
where it's so diverse when it comes to range viability. Like what makes Soul Calibur so different from Tekken is that you can initiate your offense from almost full screen with some characters. I'm a Sun Mina main, so that means I can initiate my offense right outside of what would be the traditional jump range in like Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike Tekken, where pretty much everyone has to rely on their frame data because they're initiating offense from a jab range or from like some sort of like orbital range or some sort of sweep range.
Okay.
And that's universal almost the entire cast. Like, I mean, like Kazumi can shoot tigers at you, and Akuma has a fireball. So there's anomalies to that, but for the most part, Soul Calibur is very good about creating an insane amount of diversity and not locking you into this sort of like brawler range. And DNF did that. DNF did that beautifully. I've never played a character like Vanguard ever.
No, I've never seen a character like Vanguard. Did I say Lancer?
I mean, I knew what
Yeah.
you meant. I knew exactly what you meant.
Yeah, but yeah, I've played characters like, oh gosh, the punchy girl. I played a lot of characters.
Striker.
Yeah, Striker. Thank you. I played a lot of characters like Striker. I played characters similar to Ghostblade, and I mained Ghostblade, and I've seen characters kind of like Inquisitor. I've seen characters like Crusader, but like nothing was like Vanguard or Grappler. Like those two characters were awesome. So, but yeah, on to the main topic was for Project L. In order for it to be successful in the FGC and just in general, because that was the main thing. The one thing I've noticed throughout Discord, Reddit, and other things is that I've seen Project L be a lot more popular amongst rioters, like Riot game players, than I have FGC. Well, at least the FGC, like the pros are pretty excited about it. I've seen like Tweety say he's like really excited, and Jaywong, but I've seen a lot more Riot Games players more excited about it than FGC players.
I mean, I would say that's accurate. I think I don't know if it's the reason, but one reason is because the game is still so nebulous, right?
That's more so just an observation than anything else.
And because of sponsorships, Tweety, I don't know what his situation is, but Justin Wong will generally say that about many things, just because it's his job to try the new game.
True.
Generally, your sponsors want you to do the new thing, and that's not to say he doesn't like games. I mean,
Yeah.
Justin Wong has gone on record saying he did not like Street Fighter 4, and he welcomed Street Fighter 5 with open arms. There's a whole lot of like background lore to that with Triforce and stuff like that. A lot of reasons why. The reason he played Rufus because Triforce told him to play Rufus. So there's a lot of history there, but yeah, you know,
I wonder if does that happen in like the pros? Like, will teams like Panda will they go up to Punk and say, hey, we need you to play Kareen?
I don't think so anymore. With Triforce, it was a special situation because Justin Wong was sponsored and employed by Chinatown Fair.
Okay.
And Triforce said, hey, you know, if we want to market you, we need you to play an interesting character. And he's known for, you know, turtling. He was a big Marvel 2 player, and he played Third Strike Chun-Li. So he was a traditionally very defensive.
He's a Chun-Li player.
Oh yeah, and so turtling's his thing, just like pokes and just exploiting ranges is kind of like, and even then in Street Fighter 5 he played Minot, and it was a very, very turtly Minot, so that's kind of like his wheelhouse. And Triforce told him no one wants to see that, right? So
yeah,
you're
you don't see a lot of
going
Minot players.
Yeah, well, this was Street Fighter 4, so this was Rufus. I think I imagine he probably would have played someone like maybe Guile.
Okay.
But Triforce is like, we need you to rush down. That is what the streamers are going to want to watch, right? So, yeah, that was sort of like
That's weird.
The origin story of Justin Wong's Rufus, and I don't know who he ended with.
Because because I'm so used to like for instance when Sonic Fox used Collector, like he did it because he just wanted to prove a point that Collector was a viable character.
Yeah,
And
that worked to his favor as well, because Sonic Fox is always a little bit controversial, but Sonic was especially controversial in MK11.
Sonic is controversial regardless, no matter. He's always controversial.
Well, the thing is, like, Sonic said that Sub-Zero was low tier, I think, almost the entire life of the game.
Yeah.
And I think that viewpoint is insane. I don't know how a sane person can believe that. And I'm not sure if I believe that Sonic believed that, but that led to clicks, right? So it was a good marketing decision.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think honestly, Sonic was right about Collector. I think I would say Collector
Yeah.
probably was really underrated.
No, he's extremely underrated. I mean, as much as MK is known for its violence and its gore, I mean, if a character looks awful, people aren't going to want to play him. Same thing with like Ferrator. Like you didn't see any Ferrator players.
A little bit. I want to say Biohazard used Ferrator closer to the end.
But it took that long.
Yeah.
Like when you first open the game, I mean, the first thing people are going to want to play is Scorpion, Sub-Zero, Katana, Melina. Like that's the first thing that people kind of go towards.
And the Canadian guys, I think, were just now starting to get some spotlights. I don't think the Canadian Honeybee, and I think Honeybee and Biohazard are brothers.
They are.
I am going to Google. Okay, good. I want because that's a big thing to get wrong.
Yeah, no, they are.
All right, yeah. So I think more maybe they might have been there for Injustice 1. Biohazard, I think, did play Bane in Injustice 1.
Okay,
but my memory. These games are too old, man. My memory doesn't work as well for the Injustice.
You didn't like Injustice, did you? Or at least you didn't like Injustice 2.
I was okay with 1. I would never play the first Injustice now. But back then, at the time, in 2013, I thought the game was okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I dropped it because really the DLC. I thought Scorpion was just so ridiculous. And
yeah, about that, I do remember reading, or no, not even reading. I think it was Ed Boon actually openly said that Scorpion was their #1 sold DLC character.
Yeah, I believe it.
And I thought that was crazy to think that, because I'm like, why don't you just go play Mortal Kombat if you want to play Sub-Zero? Why would you do that? And I think that kind of opened the door for guest characters from that point on.
That one of the many doors, right?
I think horror characters is one thing, but
there's also horror characters for sure, and I guess it's hard to argue how successful Kratos was in MK9. That's a little harder to gauge.
Yeah,
but Injustice 1 was in many ways a giant disappointment. It didn't survive in my scene. In the San Antonio scene, we went back to MK9 within about 2 to 3 months, and MK9 thrived for about another year after that. We wanted Injustice to play like MK9 without the crippling bugs that were in MK9, and we just didn't get that.
Yeah.
And the game had ridiculous balance issues. But I think it's a more complete game than Injustice 2, in terms of playstyles, at least.
Yeah. I actually enjoyed Injustice 2, particularly like Robin and Supergirl. But I felt it was fun for about 2 weeks. And then it just dropped off.
There's a repetition to Injustice 2, not just with the zoning wars, but most of the bread and butters feel very samey.
Oh gosh, the zoning was garbage. I remember that.
And I would say that was the first game where I guess this is some tinfoil hat stuff, right? But I'm pretty sure the top tiers were engineered to be top tier, and it was very apparent, and that just killed the viewability of the game, which is kind of feeds back into the League topic, because I think that's going to be one of the points of success. Is how much do people enjoy watching this game? And that's where the DNF problem kind of becomes very relevant, right?
Okay.
Because if a person wants to watch League, there's 2 kinds of people: those who are familiar with League and those who are not. For those who are not, they have to enjoy watching fighting games to begin with, and they have to understand what's going on and enjoy watching it, despite their lack of knowledge. But then you have the flip side of that, whereas you have a League fan. And now they're presented with a dilemma. Do I watch the League fighting game, or do I watch a stream of traditional League of Legends? And that's going to be a hard dilemma to overcome, I think.
You know, I didn't think about that, and that's actually like very true. And League is if you don't know what's going on, it's kind of like rugby is probably the best like analogy I can think of. It's like if you know what's going on in the sport of rugby, it's extremely fun to watch. But if you have no idea what's going on, it just looks like chaos. And that's exactly what League of Legends is. It's literally organized chaos. And
yeah, I can believe that.
And like I remember showing my wife a couple of snippets of like my videos, and she was watching like the league, like the clips of like League of Legends, you know, and she was like, there's the characters are so small, there's all these colors and stuff like that. She goes, I have no idea what's going on. But when you're watching, you know, Street Fighter 5 or Mortal Kombat, it's, you know exactly what's going on. Even if you never watch fighting games, you know what's going on.
That is true, but I think there's a team element that makes it the league more attractive to the new player, or I'm sorry, the new viewer, right? I think you just need to know enough to tell if the team you want to win is winning or if the team you want to lose is losing. I think if you can get that much, I think the starting line for League might be easier, and I can't speak from experience, because that's the big problem with fighting games. I think Marvel vs. Capcom 3 is one of the most enjoyable to watch fighting games of all time. But I found over the years that if I don't know who's playing, or if I do not care about the players who are playing the match I am watching, it's insufferable. It's just you're watching a virtual combo video. And and maybe that was fun in like, I don't know, 2012. It has not been fun for many years now, which is why my favorite. But on the flip side of that, my favorite top 8 of all time is the 2014 Evo top 8 of Marvel vs. Capcom 3, which is, I think, I still rewatch that from time to time because it was such a great top 8, right? So
I have to go back and watch that one.
Yeah, check it out. And there's a big storyline there because Justin Wong was, I think, reasonably. Most people would say he's the best Marvel 2 player of all time, and he had not taken an Evo yet for Marvel vs. Capcom 3.
Okay.
So he came close. He did well in top 8s previously. But that was supposed to be his game. And then 2014 he was making the top 8, and everyone was like, is this the year, right? And I won't tell you if he wins or not, but at the very least he comes very close. And then you have this other storyline of Chris G is using Doom Morgan, which is, I'm not going to say the team's broken, but it is overpowered in a sense that most traditionally overpowered characters in modern fighting games were not nearly as overpowered as Doom Morgan. And Justin Wong had to go up against that twice. He had to do that in the previous top 8
who was
in the previous year as well. Chris G was the one running.
That's what it was, because I remember the Dr. Doom Morgan team, and that was like one of the most unbeatable teams.
Yes, it was. And not only was it hard to beat, but people did not love watching that team play. So when the Chris G Doom Morgan thing took off, people would follow suit, and then they would lose to Chris G. But speaking for myself, at least, and this was my perception, I don't think anyone liked watching that team outside of Chris G, which was a lot of people. And so when you have Justin Wong and Chris G going up against each other, you have one who's underdog, and you have one who's running the most dumb team in the history of dumb teams. It becomes a very interesting watch. But if I'm watching some rando play Virgil, it's insufferable. I can't watch that anymore.
Right. I mean, there was a point in time when League of Legends was falling off, and the reason being was because it was backstory, like a lot of the Korean teams are really, really good. There's a lot of pros in South Korea, and South Korea is just known for its gaming scene. I mean, it's like their national sport was like StarCraft 2.
They're debatably the best at Tekken as well. Debatably, but I would say they're the best.
No, it is. What was it? I kind of lost track there. But for a long time, Korea is still, has the best teams, has some of the best teams. And if you watched Worlds 2022, it was just all Korea. And for a long time, it was really boring to watch. Not so much anymore, but for a long time, it was really boring to watch because they came up with this strategy, and it was like a slow kill strategy where it was not aggressive whatsoever. And all they did was just farm minions and build up from there. And it was just like a slow kill. And there was not a lot of action going on. So, we got a drop off of viewers until there was a Korean top laner who came in and changed things up because of how aggressive he was. And he ended up like doing really well after years and years and years of not doing well. And if you go to like more Western teams, we're a lot more action heavy. We like to, do team fights, and we like to, like get the high kill games, versus like Korean teams are a lot of high CS games. CS is creep score, or how many minions you killed, so you can, stack up gold and buy better items. Because I know you don't play League, so I'm trying to like make this as easy to follow as possible.
That makes sense.
But yeah, and it was really boring. It was really boring to watch, and nobody wanted to watch it. And it got a lot better. And since then, there's a lot more action. And now, I mean, World's had, I think it was, I have to look at it again. It's like the highest was like 1.75 million viewers at one point. It's still like one of the most watched, tournaments ever. But it's like really, really high. And I think it was $479,000 went to the winners. It was a really, really high payout. But it turned around after a while. But are you kind of insinuating that there's with fighting games there's been lack there of drama?
To some extent. Well, I mean, quarantine didn't help that out, right?
True.
Any storyline that existed pre-quarantine, I don't think survived the 2-year gap. But I think a bigger problem is that I think player investment in general.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the essential parts of watching fighting games is caring about the player who's playing. There's not many fighting games that, well, maybe some. I think I can't think of an immediate exception. Maybe Skullgirls might be the exception to that, where I can just enjoy Skullgirls because I can see the resets. I'm like, okay, how many resets can be done on this player? Most games, though, I can't. Even then, I don't watch a ton of Skullgirls, so I don't know how to solve that problem.
It's a little too chaotic for me. I'm not gonna.
Yeah,
like it's fun to watch after. Like I can't watch it for too long. It's just a little too chaotic.
Top 8's more so. I can't really watch pools for Skullgirls.
Okay. But I mean, like, a lot of people care about Sonic. Whether you want him to lose or you want him to win, people really care about Sonic Fox. So, but is there other current fighting game players that people can care about as much as they care about Sonic?
I don't know. Outside of the Skullgirls community, I don't think so. No one comes to mind.
Okay.
But what makes Sonic special is Sonic went into the Skullgirls scene already being kind of famous for Mortal Kombat.
True.
And now Sonic is famous for Dragon Ball Fighters. Probably more so than Skullgirls even. So
you think so?
Oh yeah. Well, Dragon Ball Fighters is kind of in a good place right now. They're about to get rollback. And they're still kind of pointing tournament numbers. I don't know how many, but it's enough to keep them coming back to EVO, which is a big deal for a game that's almost 5 years old, I think. 2018.
And it's still, I mean, I remember seeing on Reddit, people are saying like, when's Dragon Ball Fighters 2 coming out? I'm like, why do you, in my head, I'm like, why do you need Dragon Ball Fighters 2? Like the game looks fantastic.
Well, the good news is now we don't. Before I was in team Dragon Ball Fighters very much so because the netcode was so bad. And I
that's
think
true.
Now, with that solved, we're good.
We are.
Now, granted, you can make an argument for the balance. There's still the fusion meta. Even though they nerfed Android 21, it's the consensus seems to be wasn't enough.
One does not simply nerf Android 21 lab code. Yeah. Like you don't nerf lab code, dude. She's too good.
That game has such a ugly history of balancing, unfortunately. Maybe the ugliest I've ever seen.
But I think honestly, like one of the top moments for me was actually seeing Goichi win.
Yeah,
because and to talk about one for Sonic Fox and Dragon Ball Fighters was actually like that was a big moment that I liked watching was Goichi win. And to see how emotional he got was, I thought that was a pretty big deal, and a lot of people cared about that.
And that was really just a big rivalry from all angles because Goichi is powerful in all fighting games. Like he's also an amazing Street Fighter 5 player. And I'm sure there's other games I'm not thinking of. He even played Sub-Zero in MK11. He is unbelievable.
He played Mortal Kombat?
He did. He streamed Mortal Kombat. He actually really liked the game, but he said no one played it.
Wasn't Mortal Kombat illegal in Japan?
Not illegal. It was probably illegal to sell. I don't know if it was illegal to have. So you could probably stream it. You just have to import it.
So it's like if you can get it, you can play it, but you can't buy it.
I also don't know if it was formally illegal. I don't know if it was just an issue of like there was no Japanese version to buy. It's like, okay, well, we don't sell in Japan. And if we did make like a Japanese translation or a Japanese port of the game, it's not obvious to me that retailers are going to carry it, or retailers may not want to carry it, or there may be like legal implications if they do carry it. So I don't know how formal that ban was. It wasn't like Australia and MK9, where MK9 was like actually banned. I think to this day it's still banned in Germany, all versions of Mortal Kombat. There may be some updates to that, but I think that is the case.
And really?
I think so, but I could be wrong.
Because I know Mortal Kombat was actually really popular in Russia.
Oh yeah,
but Germany?
I think so.
Like I had heard about that, but I didn't know it was Germany. But
I think the biggest European Mortal Kombat tournament is in Vienna. So that's Austria, but that's like next door to Germany. So I imagine there's a big base of German players. There's also a Sub-Zero player. I think he played noob in MK11. His name slips my mind, but he is very good at the game. So there is a presence for sure.
Okay.
My information might be outdated on that, but Goichi did really like MK11. At least it seemed that was the case, right?
Yeah.
So that rivalry, because the thing about Sonic Fox in general is people said if Sonic played other games, he would get, his ass beat.
I remember that.
That is just so obviously not the case. Because, I mean, it's not just Dragon Ball Fighters,
That was a big deal for him to win Dragon Ball Fighters Evo. Because, like, didn't he win Dragon Ball Fighters and Mortal Kombat Evo, like, in the same year?
I don't know. I do want to double check.
Yeah, I have to look that up. But I remember that's a big deal for him to win Dragon Ball Fighters at Evo because a lot of people said, "Oh, he's just an NRS player. Like he wouldn't do anything outside of an NRS game."
Well, I think the big thing there is also Marvel Infinite was before that, and Sonic was murdering people in Marvel Infinite too. So the narrative was dead even before that.
He was doing really good in DOA, wasn't he?
Oh yeah, actually, his brother, I think, started in DOA.
Yeah, his brother was a big Dead or Alive player. But I remember watching Sonic Fox when he was like 12 or 13 years old, just rip people in DOA.
Yeah, Tom Brady also got a start in DOA, along with Perfect Legend. No one really talks about that anymore, but technically that's where those two started.
Okay.
So DOA also has a very tainted tournament history. Really, most games before 2010 have a tainted tournament history. Soul Calibur is a big one.
When you say tainted tournament history, what do you mean by that?
As in, the game died because of tournament shenanigans and corruption. So there weren't many games to begin with, but DOA was one of the first really sponsorship-heavy games, and there was a ton of corruption in the background. I believe with seeding and payout. Soul Calibur was more of a grassroots problem. There was just a lot of collusion, and after there was some collusion that was proven beyond a shadow of a doubt for Soul Calibur 2. the game basically died and stayed dead forever, which is very unfortunate. But
Yeah, because that was one of the better ones.
yeah, I still love 6.
Mm-hmm.
6, I think, came out arguably at a really bad time, but arguably at a very good time as well.
Yeah.
That's a good example for League 2. It's because, like, what happened to Soul Calibur 6, right? And I would say nothing happened. Soul Calibur 6 was relatively successful.
Yeah, it is.
It just, what really happened is people changed the definition of success to exclude games like Soul Calibur 6. And we saw that with MK9 as well. That's its own top. I mean, that's probably a talking point. Like, what would you say is the meaning of success for League and the FGC? What would you how would you know when the game's successful or not?
That's a good question. And so that's a good question, because if you were to ask a lot of people, because that's a huge topic for the FGC, is that, do you want the FGC to kind of remain small and grassroots, or do you want it to grow? And I've had people argue with me over me comparing the sales of a fighting game in comparison to like Modern Warfare, where Modern Warfare is selling 130 million copies in the first week, and then Mortal Kombat 11 sells 12 million. So in comparison, of course, Modern Warfare is going to be the more, I would say that's the more successful, but that's a really hard question, because if you look in comparison to MK, like Mortal Kombat 9 to Mortal Kombat X to Mortal Kombat 11, Mortal Kombat 11 sold 12 million copies. Mortal Kombat X sold 11 million copies. Well, how many did Mortal Kombat 9 sell?
I'm not sure, but I remember the news article saying that the sales of Mortal Kombat 9 basically made the game pay for itself. So WB said they lost no money on purchasing MK9 from Midway.
Okay.
Which is Mortal Kombat from Midway, yeah. That's fantastic, yeah.
Yeah, and it's also a great, like, Mortal Kombat 9 for as far as the FGC goes was a huge success. And because it was one of the more tournament viable ones, but that also leads into another thing about, like, for instance, Street Fighter 5, which had one of the worst launches, like, in fighting games. And a lot of people had said it was because they focused too hard on esports. Like, they were hyper focused on tournaments. And
that is common. I partially agree with that.
And also they didn't have any, like, story or anything like that, right? Like, they had no other content.
Yeah, it was free DLC, but I think one of the biggest, there were other, like, we think of the negative problems, like the absence of a story mode, the absence of a larger roster.
Right.
There's some more positive problems. Not positive as in, like, good, but positive as in substantial, as opposed to a privation, like the absence of story mode. Like, the game didn't look that good compared to Street Fighter 4. It looked like more Street Fighter 4 from the casual eye. And I think from that perspective, I think that partially hurt the game.
And if you look at Street Fighter 5 compared to Street Fighter 6, it's night and day.
Yeah.
It is. Street Fighter 6 is such a good looking game.
I don't know what the selling point of Street Fighter 5 was supposed to be to the casual. I don't, because Street Fighter 4, the whole selling point was Ryu's back. Blanca is back. Street Fighter is back. Right. I think now granted, I don't want to convey that the premature release and sort of like the fact that they installed a computer virus on your computer via Steam, I don't want to downplay that. That was all a huge problem.
Yeah.
But I don't know what their guns were loaded with. They expected Street Fighter 5 to be as successful as Street Fighter 4. It's kind of like the Wii to the Wii U. That's how I see Street Fighter 5. It's we're going to like it, but
that's not that.
Because the Wii had a selling point that just, was very, you can't do twice. You can't make two Wiis, right? Grandma already bought a Wii, and she plays it with her grandma friends. You can't do that again. And Street Fighter 5 didn't have a gimmick for anyone outside the FGC. Like, I'm glad Armika came back. I'm glad Karen came back. But what do you tell, like, little Joey? Why does he buy Street Fighter 5? And I don't think that was ever really addressed in the game.
So that's a good point, because why was League of Legends so successful then? Because it doesn't have anything like that. When League of Legends first came out in 2009, when I first loaded it in, it had 30 playable characters. The only two things you could do was 5v5 or 3v3, and the game was incredibly unbalanced, and all there was competitive online. That's all there was, and you can buy skins. But if you wanted the story, you had to read it, and you can go to their website, and they had the story that you can read.
Yeah.
But when League first came out, when it first, and then when it first became prominent was like 2011 for, so gosh, season 1 was at DreamHack. The season 1 Worlds tournament was at DreamHack, and it had a $50,000 payout to the first place winner. And it didn't pay for any of the hotels or anything. Like everybody had to fly there. They didn't have their own thing. They had to use DreamHack to actually play. But I mean, that's all it was competition. And the founders were like, we want to make this an esport game. And in my opinion, what I thought was that they gave everyone the illusion that you can be a pro. That was kind of the way I saw it. Like they had the ranked and they had the LCS, and they kind of gave everyone the probability that you can be successful as a professional full-time player.
I think also Dota was a factor, and this is a guess. This is definitely out of my wheelhouse, but I think League benefited from having a genre of very successful games to kind of stand on the shoulders of. Dota, I imagine, is one of those. Although I admittedly don't know a lot about Dota, but StarCraft as well. I imagine, because they're very different games, but I imagine there's a lot of overlap in the appeal.
There's a lot of
that's a guess, though. Yeah,
there's a lot of RTS influence for sure. But I mean, League first took off. When League first took off, it was the Dota players that came over. That knew all about it, and it was those players that wanted to play it. But beyond its first 2 years, how did it grow to be so prominent? Is kind of the question. Is like, how did League grow? Versus,
I imagine the viewer has a big factor in that. I think even though StarCraft is a very different game,
okay,
my intuition tells me the person who would enjoy watching StarCraft would also enjoy, and more importantly, be able to understand what's going on in League. But that's a guess, though. I have no idea if that's true or not.
Yeah,
I have no clue if that's the case.
And League of Legends was huge in pretty much the West. It didn't quite make it to the East until, 3 or 4 years later, like 3 years later. Like there was one professional team in the first 2 seasons, one professional Korean team in the first 2 seasons. There's like one Korean and one Chinese team. And by the way, that could be an exaggeration. There could be like 2 or 3, but all the teams were basically Western teams. So, as far as like to answer your question about the like, what do I define as success, is when you are competing. Because here's another thing. I'm a numbers sales guy. I like to see what the payouts look like. I like to see, I judge a tournament's success based off of its viewers and viewers number 1 and its payouts number 2. Because if you're getting enough sponsors and endorsements to actually give you a decent payout for the professional players to actually walk away with a decent amount of money, then I view your event as a success. And that's the second part. The first part is of course viewers, but I look at it like esports, viewers. I look at Worlds 2022 had like on the first day had 1.3 million views. And if you look at like, Fortnite and Apex Legends and Warzone, they have millions of viewers. And then Evo had 250,000. So 250,000 is still a lot. I just think it's still a lot. But in comparison to other competitive games, it's not quite there. And I honestly think it's just because at the moment shooters are more popular than fighting games, versus in the 90s and the early 2000s, fighters were a lot more popular.
Yeah, and that'll always be the case, I think. I kind of think of it as like lemonade stand logic, as like a corporation is successful when they're able to make like a surplus profit of like millions of dollars. But the lemonade stand can't be held to that standard, right? The lemonade stand is successful based on a surplus profit of the lemonade ingredients, right? So
that's a good point. And a lot of people brought that up to me too. They're just like, you can't compare Warzone and League of Legends to Street Fighter and Tekken. Like, you can't, and I was like, yeah, that's a very valid point.
And we'd be screwed if they did, because can't have more than, I don't think there's a million people out there who understand fighting games well enough to watch and enjoy it. Maybe now that will change from fighting game to fighting game.
I think Street Fighter 6 is going to change a lot of things.
Yes and no. I think it's going to be like, visually that game is beautiful, right? I love watching it. I was so glad I got in the closed beta, because it really improved my opinion of the game.
We were all sitting there like, Temp, you mother effer.
I know, it was great. I just was like, man, that was a great moment, just watching everyone not play the game while I played the game. I'll never forget that. I'm always going to hold that very close to my heart. But the game is beautiful. Yeah, it's also really complicated. There are so many mechanics in that game. Because like, the characters, like, if you don't know how Street Fighter 6 works, characters are just going to glow for no reason. The game is going to turn into Splatoon for no reason. You have to understand how these things work, and if you don't, it's the Marvel versus Capcom problem. It's just a fireworks show. So not to the same extent, obviously.
A lot of spray paint going on there.
So that's the thing with shooters, is people know how a shooter works. With fighting games, even if you know how the game works, there still isn't an immediate transparency to the decision making of the players. Even if you understand every mechanic, you're not going to understand why Kazunoko is just whiffing crouching medium punch. Okay. You're just like, I know what he's doing, because I know that if he hits a whiff normal with his crouching medium punch, he's already buffered the spiral. But like, you can't just know that, right? And more importantly, there's probably not a million people out there who know that. So our numbers, I guess I don't really have a metric for what success would be for the numbers, but I would say tournament success for a fighting game would be making it to EVO and returning to EVO. And I think the League fighting game is going to hit that. I think they're going to at least get that. Pretty much everyone considers DOA a competitive failure because it's never been to EVO in like the last 15 years. I think the last EVO was ever out was in the 2000s.
I think that a lot of that had to do with its content rather than its playability.
Yeah, well, now for sure. Like, now 100%. I don't know if that was the case in like 2012. That's tough.
Okay, what was the year when they had the two girls come out and they were like jumping up and down, like, and they were saying like, look how realistic it looks and compared to us?
That was, I want to say that was 2019.
Yeah. And after that I was like, and I mean, on top of this, the president getting into like harassment trouble and stuff like that, but the game is always the game has always been a meme and a poor man's Tekken. So
I would say maybe a poor man's Virtual Fighter might be more accurate.
Okay.
I see where you're coming from, though. I know what you mean.
Yeah, I mean, and that's not saying like, 'cause the thing is I always like Dead or Alive. It's a fun game. It's super fun. And
yeah, I would argue DOA is probably, if it's not the hardest fighting game to learn, it's top 3. People really understand how difficult that game is.
Okay, here's another thing I wanted to ask is one of the arguments as to why fighting games aren't as popular is because a lot of people say that they're hard to learn, and I'll admit they are. depending on which game. I think like Mortal Kombat's a little bit easier to pick up, and Street Fighter's a little bit easier to pick up. But like Tekken, King of Fighters, what else? Soul Calibur, those are pretty hard games to pick up. But then you got games like Elden Rings, who sold 20 million? I could be wrong on that number, but 20 million copies, and it's up for Game of the Year, and that is a super hard game. So I always thought that was kind of a weird argument, but then I actually like would talk to friends of mine who don't play fighting games. They're like, oh, I would play fighting games, but they're just too hard. And I'm like, but you'll play Dark Souls, and those are super hard games, or Elden Rings. Like, it's super hard. So do you think that's like a viable, like argument as to one of the reasons?
I think the analogy works to a certain point, and in terms of the time invested. Here's where I think the analogy kind of diverges, right? So Dark Souls is hard in the sense that digging a really deep ditch is hard, right? But intuitively, though, the player knows that the thing that's killing them, they just have to hit it enough. And I think once they get that down, which pretty much everyone has that down, it's really, the difficulty is in how long are you willing to persist. It's sort of a war of attrition. With fighting games, it's more about fighting games. I often compare to learning a musical instrument. I think that's what learning a fighting game is like.
Yeah, that's true.
And if I give you, a shovel, eventually you're going to dig the ditch. If I give you a guitar, you may go months without learning how to play a single chord progression, right?
Right.
I think people just don't know what to do. And if they win, they don't know why they're winning. And if they lose, they don't know why they're losing. In Dark Souls, you know why you lost. It's because the giant dragon killed you, right?
Yeah.
In fighting games,
it leaves a blood pit behind to let you know where you died and why.
Yeah, if you don't know that you died, the game tells you died, so it's very transparent. In fighting games,
red letters says you died.
Yeah, there's no plus frames in Dark Souls, right?
That's true.
That's
you're right.
Yeah, there's no Cammy standing medium punch in Dark Souls. Now, actually, this may have changed with Elden Ring. Can't remember the name of the boss right now, but there were a lot of complaints regarding one specific boss. She kind of looks like a Valkyrie. I don't remember the name of it, but there was a lot of cheap stuff going on, and that may be a better analogy because the win condition or the lose condition just was not obvious against that boss.
Yeah,
but I'm sort of speaking not out of knowledge, because I knew I had the knowledge at one point. I just don't anymore. When I did the Elden Ring podcast, I knew a little bit more about the situation, or I learned about it then at least.
Well, so it's the amount of time you put into Elden Rings. Like, people put hours and hours and hours into trying to beat Elden Rings. It's like you can take that 20 hours that you just spent, on Elden Rings and actually, put that into how to learn Chun-Li, and you'd be a pretty good Chun-Li player.
There's a faith element too, though, and this goes back to guitar. Like, I would say if someone wanted to learn open chords of guitar, it would take them, assuming they're playing about an hour a day.
That's a fair amount.
I want to say you could probably learn open chords within about 3 to 6 weeks. I think that's reasonable. Maybe not, but within like day 2, day 3, day 4, you're not going to be seeing enough progress to make it even reasonable to believe that by the 6th week you're going to be able to do this, right? With Dark Souls, like, you can kind of see the progression a little easier. It's not so much of a faith issue. On guitar, you're kind of taking it on faith that you're going to learn this, and it really is just a matter of repetition. Fighting games are the same way, but worse, unfortunately, because you can learn everything you need to learn. You can learn the open chord equivalent in Street Fighter and still lose. You can get really good at the combo and still lose. You can master the anti-airs and master your confirms and then lose. That's really where fighting games become so challenging. So I think the only solution to this, and this is what League, I think, would need to do if they want new competitive players, like people to go to tournaments, they need to make training mode fun. Because I think the biggest problem going into the League fighting game is the DNF problem, where you had all these competitive players who love DNF, but not as much as their main game. And that's kind of what killed DNF. It's like, man, DNF is so good.
Yeah.
And then they go back to play Strive. It's like, oh man, DNF is awesome. And then they go back to Street Fighter 5, right?
I did the same thing, dude. I went back to Street Fighter 5.
I went back to Grand Blue. So, yeah, it's a problem. And it does. I'm glad you brought up the Lancer Vanguard thing, because that's another problem with DNF. It's not an IP that people are very familiar with, and that works very well in League's favor. But like the characters don't even have names; the characters are just nouns, right? So it's like, grappler. Great, cool.
It wasn't like it wasn't like. It wasn't Scorpion. It wasn't Sub-Zero. It wasn't Molina. It wasn't Katana. It was Grappler, Striker.
And just Vanguard. Dudes with gun. There's like 3 dudes with guns in that game. And it's not like if you beat the arcade mode with a Hitman that he's going to marry Striker or something. There's nothing there.
That's true.
These are shells, so
yeah, we were talking
that hurt as well. Yeah,
we were talking about that in the Discord. Is like what is that's a problem that Mortal Kombat has right now. That a lot of people play it because of the story, the lore, the characters. They want to know that, but we're not even paying attention to anything past MK9. And a lot of the the guys in Discord were like, we look back at Deception, we look back at Armageddon, like we even look back at MK2 and MK3. As far as like story goes, and they don't even want to look at anything past MK9. So it just that I bring that up because this kind of just shows like how important it is to make these characters not just like for a fighting game for competitively, but also to make them like resonate like within you and make a great story so that you can follow.
Yeah. For the sales, 100%. You have a little bit more leeway on that in the FGC, but I think one thing that may really hurt League, possibly even kill League, is if a character that no one likes ends up being very strong and dominates the top 8s.
Yeah,
that's a big problem for a lot of fighting games.
Also, that could also be a very good thing because I agree with you 100%. But there was a time when, for instance, there was one character named Teemo, and everyone hated to play against him. He was annoying, but there was a while there where competitively he was not viable. And all of a sudden, one guy brought him in and said, "Oh, I'm a Teemo player." And it's kind of the same thing like with Sonic Fox and Collector. Like no one would play Collector, and he's just like, "Watch, I'll prove to you that Collector is a viable character," and that kind of turned into kind of a drama that people could follow.
Yeah, that's that should be how it goes. The NRS community is traditionally very bad about that. Thank heaven Sonic stepped in. Yeah. But in MK9, no one wanted to run Nightwolf, even though we had very good Nightwolf players. Everyone thought Raiden was broken, but almost no one could do anything with Raiden. And then Injustice comes around and just like 16-bit ran Catwoman, but that was really about it, I think, that off the top of my head. Injustice 2 was even worse. Honeybee probably would have won Evo had he not run to Aquaman. And he beat Sonic with his main character Flash, and he still ran to Aquaman on the first round of the final set. I'm just like, what is wrong with you, man?
Yeah, dude, what's his name did that on a Foxy Grandpa at Evo 2019, I think it was like the first MK11 Evo, and he went, instead of going with I forgot who his main was at the time, but he said I want to say it was Cassie Cage, but instead of going with Cassie, he went with Kung Lao, just to do like a repeat of a previous Evo and against the guy he was going against. I mean, like that's cool for drama effect, but I was like, dude, you're losing the game because you're not going with your main just so you can play like a repeat round with the characters that you played in a previous Evo.
That's interesting. I don't know if I remember watching that set, but
I forgot who he played against, but I remember he went with Kung Lao instead of who he normally goes with. You know what I mean?
Well, I know what you mean. I just don't know if I saw the set, but Foxy Grandpa is honestly one of my heroes.
Oh, I love watching him
Because
play.
well, he was also one of the big innovators of MK9. He was the one who won record before anyone else said it. He told the community on KTP that MK9 Johnny Cage was not just good, but he was a problem. And no one believed him because I think our Cage of America was Dizzy at the time. And Dizzy was a good player.
Yeah.
But Dizzy wasn't quite on the train of Johnny Cage is just messed up.
Okay.
And then we figured it out, and Rio started going Cage. The Dominican brothers started running Cage, and it became very apparent that this character was just immoral. This was a deviant.
Because everybody just ran. It was like Sonya. Like everyone ran Sonya and Cabal. Like for a while there.
Yeah, and Cage could do well against both those characters. Jax was very good, and Jax lost to Cage. That was a big deal. The character had like a corner infinite, maybe more specifically a corner like infinite reset. But,
yeah. I like how we try to. By the way, I want to point this out. Like the whole theme of this entire podcast was supposed to be the success of projectl. And for some odd reason, 90% of this podcast we've talked about everything else besides projectl.
Well, I mean, it relates, right?
It does. It really does. But yeah,
it's what happens if What
I do is I have to put down a note. Remember the theme, because I'm ADHD and I will go down every rabbit hole, every rabbit trail there is, and not stay on the same theme. And I always tell I'll physically write down success of projectl, or I typed it, and so is like, yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry. Continue, Cage.
No, that's the good news, right? Because we can tie this back. projectl may have a Cage, but even worse, it might have an Injustice 2 Aquaman. And I really think that is what killed Injustice 2 more than anything, right?
Not Black Adam or Deadshot?
Deadshot got nerfed pretty hard before EVO, I think.
Okay.
Regardless, I don't remember if there were many Deadshots at EVO. But ultimately, though, he was pretty much irrelevant by the end of the game.
I thought it was funny when Sonic Fox held up two drawings, one of Deadshot and one of Black Adam. He was like, all right, audience, you choose. And I think they ended up choosing Black Adam, but I realized how horrific the zoning was in Injustice 2 when I was watching Sonic's stream, and he was like 2,000, and his record was literally like 2,000 wins and 2 losses, and he was just playing Deadshot.
Yeah. And Deadshot had one of the best staggers in the game. Deadshot had staggers in a game where almost no one had staggers, right?
Right.
Just almost all the normals were like 15 frame startup, 9 frame startup. Just it was really hard to like mix anyone on a string, and Deadshot could do that perfectly. Yeah,
and you would in the moment you were able for some reason to get past those staggers, when you got in close, he would have mechanics that would not just combo really hard, but get you back to zoning again. Yeah, that character was just unbelievably horribly designed, to say the least. I feel like he was badly designed. I mean, that actually is off topic. I feel like Johnny Cage is on topic, but the problems of Injustice 2 and why Paulo likes gaps so much in strings, that probably is a different topic. But they really, really need to make sure that there's no like Rashid in the new League game. They need to make sure there's no Aquaman from Injustice 2, or there's no Zod from Injustice 1. There's no Jackie from K11. Yeah. There's going to be counters. No matter what, like that's just inevitable in every game. There is a Cammy counter, there is a Ryu counter, and I mean, if you go to, Mortal Kombat, there is a Sub-Zero counter, there is a Scorpion counter, but in League of Legends too, it's the same thing. Like if you wanna counter a Kali, go with Diana. Like that's the thing. By the way, Diana better be in this game. Just throwing that out there. Diana needs to be in this game, but I think it is true that they can't have just the 3 characters that everybody choose, because I think MK11 has that same problem as well with Garrus. Like there were so many Garruses.
Yeah, they were quite early on, especially.
Yeah. And it needs to be right at release. Because if they release a game and it's insanely imbalanced, and that was another problem with dnfduel. It was really unbalanced. Swift Master was just incredibly OP, but they didn't do anything to fix it until about 2 months later.
And that's a really difficult topic, because patching too soon and patching too late, the community cannot make up their minds on this topic. No,
yeah.
to me, I don't think that there is one answer to this. I think it really depends on the game. Mortal Kombat 9 was blown up so hard because of the early patching, but I think people who say that either weren't there or they had an invested interest in the game not being patched, unfortunately. So their opinions were compromised, I think. Their integrity was compromised.
So do you think
Justin Wong doesn't want to patch because Justin Wong wants to win money? That's why. I don't. People don't realize how bad that game was and how much they needed to patch like Kung Lao Spin, which was just ridiculous, right?
Are we talking about MK9 Kung Lao Spin?
Yes.
Okay.
I think it was reversal and a combo starter.
It
insane. Had 6 frame startup. It was almost impossible to punish.
Yeah. So do you think there needs to be kind of a balance? Because the FGC is really, really trigger happy to like the moment the game comes out, and if there is like some sort of imbalances there, they're going to be like, this game is crap. And so do you with dnfduel, I feel like they waited too late, but I still feel like if you do it too soon, you're kind of like, you didn't give the heck. Oh, sorry, my timer. You didn't give the community enough time to really feel it out. Because what if, like for instance with dnfduel, what if after 2 weeks we found out that Swift Master has, like, you can punish Swift Master, like you couldn't. I mean, like we found out that it was really hard to do so. But after, like, if we patch it immediately, like within the first week, well, you didn't give the community enough time to find gaps and loopholes.
Yeah, I mean, precisely, right? You can't win. As a developer, you cannot win that debate. Every answer is wrong.
Yeah.
I use the word dilemma loosely, but the true meaning of dilemma means there's no right answer, right? That's why that's all the trolley examples. So I think DNF, in this case, I do believe they should have patched it sooner because the problems were so egregious. Now, I think it's best to answer this in thought experiments with, imagine a game releasing a character who could do 100% combo in one hit. Obviously, you'd patch that, right?
Right.
I don't think any sane person would be like, no, let's see how this turns out. No, shut up. We're patching this, right? So I think
Shut your mouth.
Like,
we're patching this.
Yeah, the dyed-in-the-wool, don't patch anything, guys. I'm sure would agree there are at least some examples where you need to do month 1 patches. And the DNF debate, thankfully there wasn't much pushback. They were more upset about there being a lack of buffs than being upset about having a patch at all.
Yeah.
But really, like, that idea of like no early patching, that's kind of a prehistoric perspective now. Most people don't feel that way outside of like the hardcore FGC. That was very much a relic of like the 2000s when people could just learn a game for 5 years. But a lot of that was disingenuous anyway, because again, people didn't want to travel to a tournament and find out their character changed overnight, which I'm not sympathetic towards at all. If you play a top tier, you accept something like that will happen. No, but again, this is where the no right answer thing really becomes a problem. Because I think if the game isn't that busted, then yeah, early patching's awful. Don't change the game. So that it's very tough. There's no right answer.
Yeah,
I think League can get away with it, right? Because the Cannon brothers generally understand what makes a good fighting game. Now, can they make a good fighting game? We'll see. I was not big on Rising Thunder, but I know at the very least they understand the elements that make a good fighting game. So I think the balance is going to be okay.
Well,
but if it's not, then they need to patch it. Yeah.
they invented Evo. I mean, they've been in the community for a long time.
Oh yeah.
So by now, they would do that. But I mean, it's not just them who are making it too. It's like I like the whole if we wouldn't do it, we won't make it philosophy.
Yeah.
That they have. But yeah, I feel like they are heading down the right path, and with Riot Games saying, I don't know if you saw there was a podcast with Ghostcrawler, who's making the Riot Games MMO, and Riot Games is just, they're pretty much like, we'll give you the time and resources you need to make a good game, but if you don't make a good game, you're not going to have a job here anymore.
Dang.
Yeah. So I mean, it's like, we'll make a good game, we'll give you the time, we'll give you the money, like go ahead and do it. I mean, I think that's anywhere, to be honest. I mean, I'd rather have that and be like, I would rather be sitting there with Riot Games and them telling me, we'll give you all the time and the money that you need to make the good game, just make a good game, versus Midway saying make a good game in 1 year.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and the money is never a guarantee either. Like a lot of fighting games had a lot of money and a lot of time, and we're still bad. I hate picking on Injustice so much, but I think Injustice 2 is a great example of that, where they had the money and they had the time to make something great, and it was the victim of a lot of bad decisions. Because I think the reason why I don't want to pick on Injustice 2 too much is because I know people who are big fans of that game, but I don't think anyone can argue with the balance problems. I don't think anyone can argue with the meta. So yeah, I would say I'm optimistic for League in terms of gameplay.
Okay.
I'm not terribly optimistic for it in the scene, and that mostly goes back to are Strive players going to give up Strive? Are Blaze Blue players going to give up Blaze Blue? I think that's the real problem it has to overcome.
I'm sorry. So you're optimistic it's going to do well, but you're not optimistic it's going to do well in the FGC?
Well, somewhat. So I'm optimistic the game is going to be good. So I'm optimistic that the game will be fun to play. I don't know if it'll be my cup, but I think people are going to pick it up and really enjoy it.
Okay.
Now, like, is Kissy K going to be like, I'm going to play this instead of Strive? Although he's probably not the best example because he already runs multiple tournament games.
Okay.
But like, is Justice Wong? Oh my gosh, is Justin Wong going to really put more time?
Justice Wong.
I don't hate that name actually. It has a ring to it. Yeah, is he going to prioritize the game? And really, priority is the real battle, in my opinion. Okay. Who is going to play League instead of their favorite fighting game?
Like, is Tweety going to hang up MK and go over to projectl?
If MK12 is good, I don't think he will.
Yeah,
that's my prediction. Now, will MK12 be good? Well, maybe. That's tough.
Yeah.
MK11
I'm a little bit more optimistic. I'm a little bit more optimistic about MK12 than I am about MK11 and MKX. Now, take note, I enjoyed MKX. But I know a lot of people didn't, especially after the I forget which Evo it was, but when Sonic Fox was, I believe it was grand finals, when he they were first to 5 and it was both guys were 4-4 and he whipped out Alien and just destroyed him. Like the last game, it was a big deal because they pretty much ruined MKX after that.
I see that was with Tekken Master. I want to say
it was. That's right. It was with Tekken Master.
Total Con.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he was going with, I believe he was going with Aaron Black, or it would have been someone else. But then he switched over to Alien and just ran a train through him, and he just pointed out like, oh, there's a balance issue and stuff like that. Anyway, where was I going with this? With
MKX, I think there's always good reasons to be optimistic about Mortal Kombat because it seems the pattern is every Mortal Kombat game is a direct response to the gameplay of the previous Mortal Kombat game.
This is true.
People didn't like the bugs of MK9. The bugs are gone, but so is the meta. People didn't like the 50/50s.
Who plays MK9 anymore, right?
Yeah, well, it's hard. It's you can't buy it anymore, right?
Yeah, you can't. You can.
And then the 50/50s MKX, come MK11, those are all gone.
Right.
Excellent, right? And then you have a million other problems. But
I'm pretty optimistic about MK. Okay, first off, I'm a glass half full person, and I know it's kind of I would have a hard time discussing. Not me personally would have a hard time discussing it, but we would talk about, like, you know, for instance, it took me years to finally just say, okay, MK11 wasn't that great of a game, because as an MK fan, I wanted it to be good. And when you want something to be good, you have a really hard time accepting the fact that maybe it wasn't as good as you wanted it to be, and accept the fact that this isn't a good game.
Yeah, well, I'll be real with you. I'm a glass half empty kind of person. And I think
brought you on the podcast, dude.
Yeah, it's a good mix, right? It's both perspectives.
Yeah.
And even with the things I liked about the game, I could not get past the idea that they were refusing to balance the top three, and I couldn't get past the idea of Breaker. I couldn't. The game I wanted to play was not possible because of Breaker, and that became evident very early on in the game.
And I was a Katana main in MK11. It was so hard to have a full combo going, and all of a sudden they would not the Breaker. I'm drawing a blank here. What it was called? Breakaway. Yeah, and your combo would keep going, and they would just punish you right there, all because, like,
yes, Katana had a lot of duration frames.
Yeah, gosh, it was ridiculous. But yeah, you would punish someone doing a jump in the duration would keep going, and they would be able to just stand back up and punish you for you punishing them. It was all sorts of bad.
I mean, there's such a long list, and plus it was very apparent that jump kicks were just, I mean, the list is very long, but I think one of the first things where I realized something's not kosher here, something's not passing the smell test was, now people can argue all day about how good or not good Sonya was, but there's one thing people cannot argue with. She had some of the best meterless damage in the game, or sorry, grounded damage in the game.
True.
And she had a 12-frame projectile. No one can argue with that.
Yeah.
Why is the character with some of the best B&B damage in the game? I think she had to spend 1 bar, but whatever. Best quarter damage in the game, some of the best mid-screen damage in the game, has a 12-frame projectile.
She had one of the best mix-ups in the game.
Yeah, I mean, you had to guess on pressure.
Overhead to a low.
And her meter burn fireball was just completely screwed up, like any sort of defense game I had against that character.
No, don't get me wrong. There were things that were good about the game that I really liked, and everything. But as far as breakaway, and I to be honest, I didn't like fatal blows. I've never liked X-rays. That's just me. But
that's the best part about the old MKs is you almost never saw them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, go on.
No, keep going.
Well, I mean, you got contrast that with Jade, who didn't even have traditional bread and butter damage outside of customs. And even customs is somewhat limited, but gosh, losing to customs while I was playing like presets, let me put that aside because I could talk forever about that. But the idea just
I want to stay on how bad MK11 was.
Yeah, but design problems, right? So my guess is if history stays consistent, MK12 will be a response to all of these things. But here's where it gets ugly. They didn't intend for 50/50s to be the primary meta of MKX. I don't think they did. So 50/50s are gone.
Right.
However, it does seem that they intended for the top tier in MK11 to remain the top tier. So if we're going by history, there's no reason to believe that's going to be any different with MK12. So I just don't have any reason to believe MK12 is going to be a balanced game. I'm tying it back to League. I think League will be a balanced game, or the attempt will be there. I don't think that will be the case with MK12.
And for people who don't know, with League, they do balance patches every, I think, 2 to 4 weeks.
Dude, FGC's going to love that.
There's 162 characters. They're constantly patching it every 4 weeks. I think it is. I'm pretty sure it's every 4 weeks. So every 4 weeks they have a balance patch, and some of them are bigger than others, but Yeah.
I mean, that's good for the content creators. I think
Mm-hmm.
if you are creating content for League of Legends,
Mm-hmm.
like you have, a new story every multiple times a month because of that, right?
Right.
And not just a news story, but potentially a controversial news story. If they over nerf a character or if they over buff a character. So yeah, I mean, we'll see. I think the release date is going to be important too. Speaking of DNF, they didn't DNF no favors by releasing the game right at
Mm-hmm.
the end of the tournament season,
Mm-hmm.
which would not have been as big of a deal if DNF made Evo, which it did not. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's going to be a big deal as well. And I hope they. Well, the good news is it's going to make Evo. There's no way the Riot game is not going to make Evo. It's literally impossible.
Well, that
So
was
it won't be as big of a deal. But
that's another thing too, is because you have the Cannon brothers working on it, who are on the board at Evo, who created Evo, or one of the creators of Evo. Do you think that Riot Games is going to be separate? I'm sorry. Do you think the projectl is going to be a separate thing, or do you think it's going to be like a part of the FGC?
I think it's going to be technically separate. I think it's going to be virtually connected to Evo,
Okay.
just by association,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, I'm trying to think of a real world example of this, but
I was
I
gonna say,
mean,
I
yeah.
hate to use Smash, but it's like Smash is separate. Like Smash is its own thing.
Okay, now I follow you, right? I thought you meant like in terms of like creative control over the tournament with Riot being a presence in Evo. I was
Oh,
like,
dude,
they may be technically separate, but they're virtually not separate. So I think Riot is going to have a hand in the production of Evo, whether we like it or not.
okay.
It'll be an invisible hand. It won't be a hand that exists on paper, but it will be there just because of the Cannon brothers and their relationship to Evo. Which, I mean, it is what it is. I don't really have a criticism of that. Now, I actually don't think Smash is a good example. I don't think the League game is going to have that kind of relationship.
By the way, I want to separate Smash's community with the actual game, because Smash doesn't have, or at least a Smash Ultimate. Like the Smash Melee community is actually fantastic. Like I like that community a lot, but it's the Smash Ultimate community. I wanted to separate the community with the game.
Yeah, they're definitely distinct entities, I would say. There is not a ton of overlap.
Yeah, and
that I know of.
The reason I bring that up is the reason I say that is because when you have the competitive scene that is in Smash, that is in a game, you want them to be, or you want the game to be like, a part of Evo, but it's there tends to be a lot of drama within the scene, and it's not good. And that's the other thing: good drama and bad drama. Good drama is like Goichi versus Sonic Fox. I think that's good drama because it creates intensity in the game. It creates story. It creates motivation within the competitive scene. Versus bad drama is like a Smash player recently in Seattle like killed his girlfriend or something like that. Like that's bad. Something I have to look that up, but it was like there's been stuff like that, or there's been harassment issues. Now there's been harassment issues in other game, but it seems to be a lot of it in Smash. And when I say harassment issues, I mean like sexual harassment.
Yeah, I mean that, and Melee has its share of that.
Yeah,
both all aspects of Smash,
and
a lot of that is size. There's such large communities. As far as I know, they're like the only communities that like have autograph booths, right? So as for the answer to that, I definitely do not think the League community is going to have that problem. Although the reason might not be, a good one. It goes back to the DNF problem. I call the DNF problem just because it's shorter. But it just basically means that they need to convince people to leave their games, or they need to build a community from scratch.
This is true. This
so
is very true.
This is a plus and a big plus and a big minus for League of Legends. The big plus is that, the characters are not just like, nouns. They have names, identities, and stories. People have watched Arcane on Netflix. They're going to go in and know who these people are.
Such a big deal, by the way. Like
it is. Yeah.
It is a huge deal.
People know who Jinx is. That is massive.
Yeah.
Here's where the minus comes in.
Okay.
Remember how I said we had to convince Kizzy to stop playing Strive if we wanted to play the new League game?
Okay.
Well, we had convinced the League player to stop playing League if they want to play the new League fighting game, right? So this problem just got way more complex. Like, such props to the MK9 community for building a community from scratch. Essentially, from like we had Check, we had Conquer, but for the most part, we built this city from rock and roll, right? We all we had was the name Mortal Kombat, and we built this awesome, interesting out of a game that had a lot of problems, even though it is my favorite Mortal Kombat game gameplay wise. Now, with Skullgirls,
by the way, you just used "We Built the City" on rock and roll, and now I want to put that in my outro song, and I can't do that because of YouTube's copyright laws, which would be perfect.
It's a shame. It's a good song. It's a good video too.
It's a great outro song.
Yeah, no, it's just
I have to find a copyright-free version.
Yeah, but we can't use the MK9 model for League because MK9 was based on Mortal Kombat. There wasn't like, if you didn't like MK9, you can't play like the Mortal Kombat single player game that came out the same year. That's not a thing that exists. Or the game, there isn't like a Shaolin Monk sequel with multiplayer that came out 3 years prior that you could play instead. If you wanted to play Mortal Kombat, you had to play MK9, and that is very much not true with League. So the big selling point
is all sorts of media around it.
Yeah, and I think what makes it even worse is that, like with Smash Brothers, like if you want to play as like Pit from Kid Icarus, like you have to play Smash Brothers. That's just not really the case with League. You can play all these characters in a game that's been around much, much longer. Now they'll look better, which I think is one of the biggest assets, to tell you the truth. I think the graphical fidelity is just massive for League. That is such a game changer. Because it's like, if you care about graphics, you have to play the fighting game almost, because it looks so much better than the original League. Not that League looks bad, although I'd probably need to look at more footage to have a more solid opinion. But yes, if you really want the experience of being name a League character, any character.
Are you telling me?
Just name a character you think will be in the fighting game.
I mean, we already have 6, so Darius is one of them.
Okay, Darius, good example. So if you really want to play as Darius, and you really want the experience of like being Darius as like an alter ego you control, then the fighting game is going to be your default, right?
Right.
And I think that's the best selling point. You will not quite get that intimate of an experience with the actual League game. So that's a plus. But what happens when someone picks Darius, goes into ranked, loses, and decides that, it's like, what? I was good in the original League of Legends. What reason do I have to stay? And that's where the Cannon Brothers are really going to have to work. They're going to be like, all right, so when they get their asses kicked, we need to give them a reason to keep playing this instead of League of Legends.
Yeah. Because like, have you ever, because I know you've never played League, but it's like, that's the thing too, especially when you're playing ranked, is like, what happens when you have a 10 game losing streak and you go on, which happens, by the way, and then you drop your rank, which is a big deal, and you go all the way from, I don't know, from platinum down to gold, and you're just like, what the heck, dude? And you just wasted all this time, because League games are freaking 30 to 45 minute games, sometimes an hour long. So you're like, oh, I just wasted 6 hours playing 4 games. But people still play. Yeah. People still continue. You still play. So it's like, how are we going to convince people that are going to go on those 10? You're going to go on those 10 game losing streaks in ranked, but you're still going to want to pick it up and play.
I think the solution is probably team modes is the only thing I can think of, because single player content's going to hit a ceiling. If you make the best story mode possible, I think statistically, like if you look at the Xbox achievements, like less than 50% of people who bought MK11 even beat the story mode, right?
How many? What was it?
Less than 50%. I think it was like somewhere between 20 and 40.
Yeah. Like I played the game mode one time through the day I bought it to get through the game mode.
I didn't even do that. I watched it on YouTube. So I to this day have not beat the game mode for MK11.
And that was one of my arguments from MK, by the way, was that I think that they should put more resources into the game play itself and then make the story mode something separate.
Yeah, I think it. I don't know because MK11, if they did put more resources into the gameplay,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that would have translated into gear, or that would have translated into more customs.
Yeah.
That MK11's kind of like a weird
Well, that's what
example because that might have made the game even worse, to tell you the truth.
that's another thing too. Is that my argument was that I hated Combat League's reward system. So with Mortal Kombat, I'm sorry, with League of Legends, you play your season. We're on season, I think, 13, and you play your season. At the end of the season, if you got to at least gold, you would get a skin specific to that season. You can only get it, at the end of that season if you got to a certain ranked. And that was it. I didn't like Combat League because it was really easy to achieve these different costumes. And then 6 months down the road, you would get the same. They would take that Combat League, rename it, flip around the costumes to where if you were, they made it almost like you were collecting. And I get that for, the people who are the completionists. I get that, but it's like that's the thing about the reward system in League of Legends. It's like when you bought a skin or you earned a skin at the end of the season or whatever, that's because you earned it. And I didn't feel like MK11 had that.
Well, it was worse than not having that because there were daily goals. So that
Yeah.
meant if I didn't play that day after work, I had a very stressful job back then, then my streak was over.
Yeah.
Which is very frustrating. Having a game basically say, I don't know, it felt like an abusive relationship. I really hated that.
It sucks to be you. Right. Yeah, you're gonna have to wait. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's all for like a red scorpion. Yeah, just it was bad. It was not amazing. I don't ever want to see that again. I think Tekken has done ranked better than any fighting game. Not maybe in terms of execution, but conceptually at least.
Okay.
Where you have colored belts. It's basically like a karate system.
Okay.
You start in the dance system, and then when you get to like green ranks, you are basically a competent Tekken player. When you get to yellow ranks, you are essentially a good Tekken player. When you get to orange ranks, you can now make it out of pools in a tournament. I would say you're actually one of the. It sounds like hyperbolic, but you're really, if you make it to orange ranks without using like any like mods or cheating, you are probably one of the best Tekken players in the world. In a room of 100 Tekken players, you're probably one of the best.
That's awesome. That's good. That's good. That's really good.
In a room of 500 Tekken players, you're probably in the top 50.
So I played Tekken, but I respect Tekken immensely. It's not the style of fighting game that I want to play.
It does ask a lot of its players because you need high execution just to move. And that's a lot of it's actually my favorite thing about the game. If I'm being honest.
I watched it I watch it for Evo, and that's which brings up another question. Is like brings up another talking point with projectl is that okay? For those who don't watch it, is it going to be watchable? Because I think that's really important, because for a lot of people, like for instance me, who I have played Tekken, I understand Tekken, but I'm not a Tekken player, so but I'm able to watch Tekken and enjoy watching it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think a lot of that has to do. Well, first of all, the commentary was great for that top 8. That was just a great top 8 in general, man. And also like
are we gonna that's true, because so League of Legends has great commentary, and it all started in the beginning with Freak, Phreak, Freak, and he was a great commentator. He was great because he was so good because he knew every single character and every single move. Now it was really fun to watch him evolve, because he would pretty much like tell everybody what he would be a good announcer, say what's going on, but when things got like heated, like during a team fight, all he would do is just change his tone, versus like
Anderson.
Versus like he would just make it more abrupt, but he wouldn't change what he was saying. You know, he would say like, "Oh, Nidalee's going to throw a spear, and then he's going to, then she's going to go in and use her E, stuff like that." And he'd change pitches versus like Ketchup and Mustard. I think those guys are great at announcing, but they know every single character, they know every single move, which is great. But they're really, really good at like hyping up a battle.
They're very good at intensity.
Yes.
They're raising the intensity during the moments when you need to do it.
Exactly.
They are excellent at that.
Oh, fantastic. On top of that, they have an English accent.
Yeah, they're also funny. Like, "Oh my days" will never get old. I love that. But
Say that, I'm sorry, what?
When they say "Oh my days," yeah, that's just fantastic. They're amazing commentators.
Yeah, I enjoy watching MK when they're commentating.
I think what also makes Tekken easier to watch is that it's very easy to see when you may not know why the opponent made that decision, but you know why it worked, and you know when it's working. And even if you don't understand the game, it's very easy to perceive momentum in Tekken. You can tell when someone's moving well, even if you don't know how they're doing it, right?
Right.
I think that specific top 8 had very good storylines to it. It was Super Akuma, especially. So,
and Knee.
And Knee, yeah.
Yeah. But that was another thing too, is that it kind of brings back to that point of like balance issues. The only thing I had on that top 8 was Geese. I felt like it was a Geese battle. And
Geese is very good in that game to a fault.
I know, but it's kind of like with early MK11 was Garrus. So when I go into a top 8, which I felt Street Fighter 5 now has done very well, it was Jury versus Colleen versus who else was there? Versus Laura, which was great, by the way. That was an awesome grand finals for Street Fighter 5. By the way, I felt so bad for IDOM. Watching him sit there for like 15 straight minutes just was heartbreaking. But I felt Street Fighter 5 right now is great for that, because if I'm going to watch a fighting game, I don't want to see just Geese versus who's the other one that was played a lot. There's a Kuma, but I just don't want to see Geeses everywhere. Same thing.
Fang comes to mind. I remember Fang pretty distinctly, but even Fang,
it was like I want to see Garrus everywhere. I want to see each player playing their their character and playing it to the best of their ability. But I don't want to see just 8 of the same characters. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Speaking of MK11, that's all too common, unfortunately, for a lot of fighting games. But it happens in degrees, though. Like Rashid was very problematic in sort of like the middle era, right?
Yeah, in the middle.
And
not so much anymore.
I think if you're going to make a character OP, I think he's a great choice, because he actually is fun to watch. And
True.
He wasn't as dominant as maybe he could have been. It's hard to say why that's the case, to be honest with you. I'm not super sure why Rashid was not. I mean, he was common, don't get me wrong. He was all over the place. But I want to say you still saw Cammy more than you saw Rashid. And that's because I think there's a stylistic versatility with Cammy that just wasn't quite as there with Rashid, right? But yeah, I don't know. That can be a worry for a game. I mean, I think it'd be a really big. That's a money problem, right? And I had to go momentarily, but
no, it's fine.
I will say that
we're literally a half hour past time, so
yeah. So it's close to that time, but I'll end on 2 notes. One is that I don't think you can dump money as the solution. I think money may actually make the problem worse, because if money is involved, that means a lot of the top players are going to go to the select screen and they're going to pick Injustice 2 Aquaman. And that can hurt your game just as much as not having enough money can also hurt your game, right?
Yeah.
So I think I know the answers. I don't know if I know the solutions. But if I had to say what the answers are for the League community and the FGC, if they want League to blow up and be like this competitive phenomenon, I think they have two options. One, build a new player base from scratch, a la MK9, which is very possible, but MK9 didn't have a previous Mortal Kombat game it wasn't competing with itself, so to speak.
The 3D era was never intended to be competitive.
Yeah, and even like DC was not truly meant to be competitive, even if it was trying to go back to the roots somewhat.
I think they openly said, didn't they openly say that, by the way? Didn't they openly say, like, this is supposed to be just a fun beat 'em up fighter? Like, it was never intended to be competitive?
Their verbiage, or Ed Boon's verbiage, was Mortal Kombat is for everybody. And then when MK9 was revealed, they said this is the first time we're making an effort to cater to the competitive guys.
I remember that.
Which I still appreciate that. I'm critical of Boon, but I think he didn't have to do that. He could have had a very successful game and not cared about that at all, right?
True.
So they have a challenge ahead of them. That's option one. If the other option is to sort of farm out the current competitive players and bring them over to League. Now, people can play two games, but I don't think people can win in multiple games, right? So I don't know if that's a sustainable strategy. Some people stuck with DNF, right? Yipes is still on the DNF train. He loves that game.
Yeah.
For many good reasons, but it's going to be tough.
I would love to see it be a viable game. I would love to see that game become a viable, competitive game, but it's at its current state, no.
And there's so many good games out right now. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have not personally seen a game that came out strong, died out, and then came back. I know, like, Guilty Gear started out kind of in the middle and then had to build up. But
yeah, the Blaze Blue community also helped Guilty Gear as well, because the Blaze Blue community was built not completely, but partially on the Guilty Gear community. So when Guilty Gear came back in 2014, a lot of the Blaze Blue guys were like, "Okay, cool. Well, we're going home." And that helped a lot. But I for this specifically, here's the good news. Someone actually just messaged me today saying, "Hey, is DNF dead?" I've been out of the loop for a while, and I responded that I think it's dormant. We'll know. We won't have the autopsy until the tournament season begins.
Okay.
So we're looking at like February, March.
Yeah.
That's when we'll know for sure if there's a pulse or not in DNF. So there might be hope. I actually think balance-wise, I'm very happy with the game at the moment. Okay. They fixed almost everything I wanted them to fix. Kunoichi probably got away with murder. I can't believe that character didn't get nerfed. Yeah. That character is crazy good. I learned so much. Yeah, she's even worse now. Yeah.
I mean, my biggest thing was Swiftmaster. Just nerd. Like, he needed some fixing, and Crusader had his infinites, but those are the only two I can think of.
Well, with Swiftmaster, even if you knew what he was going to do, it often didn't matter, and that was sort of like the crux of his character design, which I think seems to be fixed right now. But Kunoichi, I think she benefits so much off straight conversions. If you get hit by a raw standing like medium attack, you're in the corner and you're losing half your life, and that's just the end of it. That's just all there is. It doesn't matter what you think after that. You are going to the corner, and you're probably going to be in the corner for a while, right? So, yeah, with League, I just those are your two options: build a community from scratch, or farm out the current competitive players. And both of those are going to be very challenging. But they don't have to commit to one solution. They can kind of mix it up a bit.
Yeah, I mean, you made it. I was good. I was glad that you said I have an answer, but not the solution.
Yeah,
because that's exactly what it is. It's like you're gonna have to deal with League, and there's also Legends of Runeterra, which is their card game. You're gonna have League and Legends of Runeterra players that you're gonna try to convince to play a fighting game, and on top of that, you're also gonna have the FGC, who you have to convince them to leave their fighting game to come over, and it amazes me, especially in League of Legends, dude. It's like, it's not so much the FGC, but it's like, I remember, I think it was Faker was playing Riven mid, and that's like that was unheard of. I forgot what year that was, and all of a sudden you would go into ranked and everyone was playing Riven mid. it was insane. Versus when I had that mentality as soon as EVO was over, and I'm a Cammy main. Street Fighter 5, I'm like, great, it's going to be Laura and Colleen players. Like, that's all it's going to be, is just Colleen players everywhere. And no, that wasn't the case at all. So
in Mortal Kombat, that often is the case. Street Fighter is sort of the exception to that, I think.
Okay.
But really, though, I mean, that's the cool. What makes it better in fighting games is it's all about expression. Although I'm sure that's true with League in a different degree. But you choose your character because it's your
expression
character.
in League.
Yeah, so it doesn't, for many players, it won't ever make sense to jump on ranked and pick the newest thing, because if their newest thing doesn't represent them, it's just counter to their goals. However, some people want to win. So if Ken wins a tournament, people are going to pick up Ken. But it's just probably to a lesser extent, I would hope. I could be wrong. Also, like, maybe there were a lot of people who were already trying to optimize, just didn't know about a setup. And once it's out in the wild, it's like, okay, now I'm picking a Buki. Now I'm going to do the dirty stuff, right?
Right. Right. So yeah, those are two. I mean, those are very valid points, and I probably would have never thought of that until you brought that up, because that was the thing I was always thinking about, is like, okay, is Riot, is projectl going to be separate? Is it going to be its own thing, or is it going to be a part of the FGC? But never would I thought, oh, you have to farm League players, or you have to farm FGC, FGC, and bring them over to their own game, or bring them over from their own game. So
it's harder now with sponsorships as well, because it's the carrot is rotting, so to speak. You can't lure players with money anymore, because the secret south, there's just, even if you triple, quadruple, infinitely increase the prize pool, there's going to be 8 people who benefit from that. But also, like, they have like Panda is taking care of their boys.
Are they?
Panda's doing good.
I did not know that.
Technically, I don't either. That's a guess, but they seem happy. They seem like they're doing all right. If nothing else, it's given them. It's complemented their streaming game, which is where a lot of their income comes from. So if their streaming is healthy, I imagine that's a win-win for Panda and for, like, Justin Wong, right? And for I want to say that Giuna is also Panda as well. But go on, yeah.
I was gonna say, like, well, there's Jay Wong, Brian F. Who else is there? Max Dude. They're benefiting greatly. I mean, but then again, Brian F is the only one I can think of who I want to say he casually competes. Like, not to the extent that, like, Punk and Just the Kid and IDOM do, but because I remember, I think it was more so in the MK community. They were the ones who were complaining about the payouts, and I agreed with them. I think the payouts should be a lot bigger. But if you want the payouts to be bigger, you need to up your viewers in order for that to happen, or you need to get more sponsors and more endorsements. But in order for that to actually happen, you need to up your viewers, because
I was sort of
you're not going to get new sponsors if they're going to be like, oh, well, not that many people are watching it, so I'm just going to sponsor over here where people are watching it.
Well, I don't have my finger on the pulse of Street Fighter 5, so I don't really know what that game looks like competitively at the moment. I'll watch, like, the big tournament top 8s, like Combo Breaker or Evo. So I don't know what Brian F is doing right now, but he's a really good example of someone who lives in both worlds successfully, right?
Yeah.
Like, Sajam is a commentator. He's very successful, but he's a streamer who commentates.
Yeah.
Like, Sajam, probably not going to be in the top 16 anytime soon. And that's okay. Like, it's funny. Like, he's very talented. He's an unbelievably good player. Maximilian as well. I don't think Maximilian or Sajam get nearly enough credit on how competitively viable they are.
Max is insanely good.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Max is really good. Another good example is outside of the FGC is like Tim the Tatman. Like, I wouldn't consider Tim the Tatman like a top ranked player, but he's a great commentator, and he's really entertaining to watch, especially when he spectates people and everything. But it's like, I always enjoy watching him. This is Modern Warfare, but I always enjoy watching, like, Tim the Tatman, Dr. Disrespect, and Z-Laner play, and, like, Z-Laner's freaking phenomenal at that game. So to have Tim spectate and commentate on Z-Laner playing is so much fun.
Both the Tekken and NRS scenes are very good about having commentators perform well in tournament.
Yeah.
I hope that never goes away.
And I wish they'd take. I mean, I wish that, because I remember, I think it was Aquaman or is it Mr.
Mr. Aquaman?
Yeah, I remember he was having a hard time getting to Evo. Due to financial reasons. Now it could be something different, separate from the devs, but that's where I think that a lot of developers, and why I think Riot, it has a potential to do super well, is because developers don't really give enough money to these tournaments in order for them to be successful, in order for professional players to make a decent living off of tournament payouts.
Yeah, what's ironic about that is in the early days of MK11, they were basically running the whole show stream-wise, even at the grassroots, and it was awful. I did not like it at all. I didn't like the ad pacing. I didn't think the commentary was what it could be. Just not amazing. And then now Aquaman is kind of carrying MK11 on his shoulders at this point.
Dude, him and MF Slayer are pretty much carrying it.
And Aquaman, I mean, props to him. The reason why he does that is because he is a defender of the faith. He believes in MK11. He likes that game. I respect the crap out of that.
Yeah.
But
even if I don't like it, I will 100. And by the way, like I can enjoy MK11. I can. It's just right now I don't. And if you like a game, regardless if a lot of people don't, just because you just simply like it, I will always back that up. I will always respect that.
I mean, it would probably be its own podcast, but there are things I like about MK11 in a vacuum. I like Staggers quite a bit. I like some of the characters. I like Cassie's, her non-zoning preset, I thought was very well designed. It's just, it's one bad apple ruins the bunch. And we're not even talking about an apple anymore. It's that bad. It's like C4 is in the apple batch right now. It's terrible. Well, I think that's a good note to end on.
Yeah. Anyway, all right, bro. Appreciate you. Thanks for talking. Almost 45 minutes over what we projected. But
yeah, well, this was fun.
There was a lot to say. There was a lot to say.
And there still is.
Yeah,
it's a deep topic that involves so many moving pieces.
This is true. This is very true. But yeah, we'll save that MK11 topic for the next time we do this.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So anyway, have a good night, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, take care, dude.
All right, later. Hey, thank you so much for watching, guys. I really appreciate you. Again, please like, subscribe, comment down below. Help this channel grow. Trying to get to 100 by the end of the week. And until next time, Shred out.